Hello, I'm Elizabeth Conley from Interview Skills Clinic. Now in this video, I'm going to be trying to answer 6 of your more recent questions on civil service interviews. Now, please remember to like and share this video with a friend or colleague who's also struggling with civil service interviews. Also, add your questions below because I always look through and try to answer them. Okay, so let's go to the first question. I'm struggling to understand the structure of civil service interviews. If I have 7 questions, will all the questions be strength-based? No, definitely not. It depends on the job specification that you've got. So somewhere on the advert or on the job specification itself, it will say to you, you will be being assessed under success profiles, and I'll give you links so that you can download the civil service behaviour framework and also the strength framework. And it'll say to you specifically, in this interview, you will be assessed using behaviours or strengths, or you're going to be assessed on technical questions, experience, and behaviours. So it's really up to the person who's running the whole of the recruitment process to define how they want to assess the candidate. And under success profiles, you have 5 key areas. So we've got behaviours. Now, behaviours are actions and activities that people do which result in an effective performance in a role. So these are just exactly like competencies that you might be familiar with in the private sector. They're no different. You then have strengths, and these are things that we do all the time, and that generally energize us. So the thinking is that if, for example, you need to build relationships in the role, so building relationships is a key part of your role, then they will actually put something like working together as a behavior, and the strength that relates to that will come under the strength dictionary. So for these interviews, you need to download both the behavior framework and also the strength framework. And if you have got strengths, so let's say they're saying to you that you're going to be assessed on behaviours and strengths, then when you go to the last page of the strength dictionary, which you can download, if you just go into, if you can't find the link, just go into Google and type Civil Service Strength Dictionary and it will come up. And I also provide a link below as well. But if, for example, we've got working together, which might be the behaviour, then the strengths that fit underneath that are going to be emotional intelligence. Well, that's about seeing things from other people's perspective, being inclusive, being a networker. You need to build relationships, so you need to network, being a relationship builder and being a team player, and also challenger. So there's a few things that fit underneath that. And they can decide when they have identified working together, they can decide which strength they're going to ask you in the interview. Now, some interviews are only strength-based, particularly maybe at EO level. They might say to you, you're only going to be assessed on your experience and strengths. And they might indicate to you even what those strengths are. So every interview is different, and you really do need to look at the job specification. Now, as well as that, under success profiles, we've got the ability and aptitude to do the job. So you might have been asked to do some online tests beforehand. You might have a test that you've got to do during the interview, as part of the interview. You might have to make a presentation on something. And they're also, and can also, be assessing you on experience. And experience can be assessed in many different ways, including presentations, but also if they are assessing you on experience, and this is something that they are more likely to do at more senior level grades, then the examples that you are sharing should be relevant for the job that you're going for, because that demonstrates the experience. So you could have a very good example for working together, but if that doesn't relate to the role that you're going for, then it's not such a good fit and you're not likely to get the highest mark. But at entry-level roles, then they're often not looking so much for the experience, but they're looking for your strengths and ability to do the job. Other roles, they will have technical requirements, and that's the professional skill. So, for example, project management would be an example of a technical skill that you need to do a job. So, really important for anybody watching these videos. I know some of the videos have focused on strengths, some have focused on behaviours and strengths, but you need to look at more of the videos that we've put together, but really understand that it depends on the job specification. You need to look and see what they are saying. And if they're not saying anything at all, then reach out to them and say, I'm just not clear, because I promise you somewhere, either in the advert or the job specification itself, they will say to you, you are being assessed on success profiles, and we will be assessing you on, and they will choose out of those 5: behaviour, strengths, ability, experience, and technical. And they will choose. It might just be one area, or it might be 3 or 4 of those areas. So you need to look at those. All right. So that's really important. Secondly, the second question is, I'm applying for a civil service, to the civil service. And in the application, it says I'm only being assessed on making effective decisions. If I proceed to the interview, is this the only question I will be asked? I think this is a really good question. If they have only identified one behaviour, then I can almost guarantee that there will be other areas that they're going to be assessing you on. And those areas will be the technical skills. It'll be the ability to do the job. Maybe they've asked you to do a presentation. Maybe you've sat an online test. But there will be more than just one behaviour. You may not get strengths, but you're not going to go into that interview and just have one question. You'll sort of be able to tell that quite easily, because they allow, depending on the level you're going for, whether you're going for a entry-level role or a senior role, but they allow anything from about 5 to 7 minutes for each behaviour question. And if you've only got one question, then your interview is going to be incredibly short. You might get, tell me about yourself and why do you want this role? But even so, it's going to be under 15 minutes. And most interviews are around 40 minutes. So you're going to have some other questions underneath that. All right. So something just isn't quite right, doesn't fit. I'd like to have a look at that job specification and I'd be able to help you a little bit more. But no, you're not just going to get one question. All right. What point should I prepare for the interview? I mean, this is a really good question. If you are really interested in applying for the civil service and you've decided for whatever reason that this is a path that you want to take, then I think your interview preparation should start earlier. Because often if you leave it until you get invited to an interview, you have a really short window, even if you're having a pre-recorded video interview. They don't give you very much time. So the application process can take a long time, but the window to interview is quite short. So if you are applying for similar roles, and you find that the roles you're applying for, the same behaviours are coming up on a regular basis, and they often do, then it really is worth preparing for those behaviours. If you find that for the roles that you're going for, you're never being asked behaviours, then you need to be preparing for strengths. Now, I know that they say online and everywhere, people say to you, don't need to prepare for strengths because this is something that you're naturally good at and doing, and therefore you can go into the interview with no preparation at all. I promise you this is not true. It is very difficult when somebody asks you a strength-based question, and they can vary hugely. It's very difficult to answer and give enough evidence to get a high mark. All right. So if I said to you, does networking come naturally to you? Or, would other people describe you as a problem solver? How do you go about ensuring that your communication is clear and well structured? There's such a broad range of questions, even underneath the strengths, that it's very difficult just to go into the interview and just think I'm going to answer naturally and I'm going to get a really high mark. All right. There are 36 strengths. So if you imagine trying to have support for each of those 36 strengths going into the interview is difficult. But what you can do is you can think about, the 36 strengths are divided by the 9 behaviours, and underneath them, they are there's a pattern to them, and they do sound fairly similar. So you can, before you go into an interview, you can actually start preparing, even before you get invited to an interview. So we've got things like, let me just go to my, and a lot of them double up as well. So, we've got, let's say that the interviews that you're going for, you generally get making effective decisions, delivering at pace, and working together. All right. So you can already be thinking about, okay, delivering at pace. It's about dealing with setbacks. It's about being adaptable. It's about being very organized. It's about resilience. Well, that's about setbacks, isn't it? It's about being focused. It's about being a catalyst. So you can start to think about, have I got examples which are suitable to support the fact that I'm really organized. I'm used to dealing with multiple different tasks. I'm really adaptable in the work I do. Equally, if it's working together, can I demonstrate that I'm somebody who's quite inclusive? Can I demonstrate that I'm somebody who is good in a team, likes to collaborate and work well with others? So you can start by thinking about some of these things. If it's about making decisions, you can be thinking about problem solving. Am I good at solving problems? Am I good at research and analysis? Because making effective decisions, particularly at the more junior levels, is not so much about the decision making, but is actually about research and analysis. So you can start by thinking about that. But a question that I've just been asked, which I think ties in with this very well, is would you use star structure for strength questions? And the answer is really no, because when you get a behaviour question, they allow between 5 and 7 minutes. They're going to ask you some follow-up questions in that. But your answer is going to be around 3.5 to 4 minutes, okay? Which gives you time to really identify an example, talk about the context, what was my role in here, what did I do, what was my thinking, and sort of to dive down into some of the detail and talk about the results and to reflect on those results, okay? So there's quite a lot that fits underneath the star structure. But when you are being asked a strength question, a strength question is something you're doing all the time. So the example needs to be more recent. And it's really just supporting what you're saying. So somebody said to you, does networking come naturally to you? If we had 10 people in a room, we will all answer that question slightly differently. Some people might say, well, actually, no, I don't think it does come naturally to me, but I've learned how important networking is, and I'm very active, and I take part. I've joined the CIPD, and I've gone along to some networking events, and I've just recently listened to a talk on whatever it might be, and so you can go into some of the detail of that. But that's not really a star example. That's not sort of saying the situation was, my task was, and this is what I did. It's really sharing an example to support what you were saying. You might somebody else might answer completely differently and say, well, actually, I love networking because I'm a real people person. I get all my energy from people. So not only if somebody joins a team, I'm always the first person to go and say hello, but also, I've set up the lunch club where we have speakers coming in to do blah, blah, blah. And also actually not only face-to-face networking, but I love social networking. So I'm great on social media, and for work I've joined LinkedIn, I've done this. So to answer the question quite differently. So it's quite difficult to have a star example that you would use for the question because it doesn't allow you to talk naturally and be yourself. And strength questions are all about talking naturally and answering the question rather than just sharing a prepared example. I hope that sort of helps. It feels safer to have prepared star examples. And if you have them, that's fine. It's going to help you think of examples, but it'd be better to have shorter, more recent anecdotes that you could use in different ways, depending on how they ask the question. All right. Certainly preparation is absolutely key. Okay, so let's go to the fifth question. During the interview, do they tell you what behaviour they're about to ask, or do I have to figure it out for myself? In the majority of cases, there's no rules about it. Nobody says they have to, but in the majority of cases, they will tell you the behaviour. So they will say to you, Ali is now going to ask you a question on communicating and influencing, and the question, and Rob is going to ask you a question on, so normally they will do. It should be fairly apparent what the question, when you hear the question, what the behaviour is. Some of them are a little bit tricky. So the ones that are tricky are maybe communicating and influencing, and leadership can sometimes sort of cut across a little bit. So sometimes they can. Sometimes maybe delivering at pace, managing a quality service, you're not quite sure where the question has come from. Just remember, if you're not sure, ask. Just say to them, this is a first civil service interview I've been for, or this role is really important to me. I'm just not quite clear. I know you're assessing me on behaviours, but I'm just not quite clear what behaviour that fits under, and I just want to make sure that I'm actually answering it in the right way. And they're going to tell you. And if you said that once or twice, they would definitely tell you every single time. But most people will tell you the behaviour anyway. All right. Okay, so for question 6, I'm trying to enter the civil service after 20 years in the private sector. But if I have to answer the questions in this template style, it really makes me wonder whether they tolerate creativity or lateral thinking. I've only had one interview, and it doesn't feel as though I'm talking to real people. I totally get that. I think any organisation, not just the civil service, but private sector as well. You could go to an interview at Amazon where you have, 4 45-minute interviews based on their, leadership principles. So a lot of these organisations, in an attempt to make their interviews as fair and as open and as possible, as transparent as possible, they are very structured. And the whole difficulty with having very structured interviews is it just feels more formulaic. It really does. So I totally get that. Despite the fact that the interview feels a little bit formulaic, it's really important for you to still engage and be yourself, because they still need to get a sense of you as a person, because by doing that, they're going to like you. And at the end of the day, even if you answer all the questions perfectly, do they want you on their team? So you've got to try and get around that and over that, and just sort of understand that these big organizations do now run quite formalized interviews. In terms of the other question about does it mean that they don't tolerate creativity or lateral thinking, I don't think that's the case. I think it's just that they are looking at the skills to do the job. So this idea, we do a lot of interviewer training for organisations, and I know with some organisations, they might say to me, well, actually, we don't have any questions, we don't have any framework, and it's really up to the individual manager to see whether it's a good fit. And that's great if that hiring manager is doing it fairly and accurately. But actually, what happens when somebody else is running an interview and they're not running the interview like that, but they might be thinking, well, actually, I'm not going to give this person the job because they've got a very different background to myself. They speak in a different way. They look very different. And then you get a lot of unconscious bias coming in. So you've sort of just got to go with it, really. It's about, have you got the skills to do the job? And if that job requires you to work with lots of different stakeholders, you are going to have a question on working together, because there's no other way that they can judge it. You might say, well, I'm great at working with other people, but where's the evidence? So it's all about giving evidence in your interview, and so that they can make a comparison between one candidate and another candidate. And there really isn't another way of doing it. They do combine, as we've got strength-based questions, we've got technical questions, we've got tests, we've got presentations, etc. So there's a real combined approach. But this is really the way most organisations are now doing interviews. So in order to do well, you sort of need to do your preparation first, and then you need to let go a little bit and be yourself and not be too formulaic. Even though you want to write out your answers, you want to learn them, it's not the way. You've just got to get to know your stories really well, and then be able to be flexible, to be able to change and adapt your answer depending on the question, so they get a sense of you as a person. All right. I know that's not easy, but that's really, what we need to do in order to do well in interviews today. I hope that's helpful. We have lots of other videos on civil service and outside the civil service as well, so please do check them out. We've got 3 specialist coaches for civil service interviews. We're approved across the departments. We work internally as well as privately with clients like yourself. We do one-to-one coaching. If you'd like one-to-one coaching, you can book a free consultation on the website. The website is interviewskillsclinic.co.uk. And in April, we're sort of conscious, really, that particularly at entry-level jobs, interview coaching might not be affordable for everybody. So we are launching our own online interview courses for people at entry-level roles in the civil service. So if this is something that interests you, please get in touch with us. We're only going to be launching it to a small number of people initially. So please do get in touch with us if you're interested in that. In the meantime, add your questions below. I promise I do look at them and try to help. And good luck with your interview.